Hey guys, welcome back to Jessen Reads Romance. I'm Jessen, and today I'm going to be talking about this book called One to Watch by Kate Stayman-London. And spoiler alert, I did not like this book. I actually had a lot of problems with it, which I'm going to discuss in detail, but I just wanted to let you know that this is my personal opinion about the book, and I'm by no means trying to diminish anybody who enjoyed this book. But if you did enjoy this book, maybe this review isn't for you. But I'm honestly frustrated by how this book was marketed and my expectations going in, which I will outline, and I will tell you why I expected a different type of story than what I got and why I was so disappointed. There's a lot to cover with this book, and I want to jump right into it. Before we get started, if you're not familiar with this book at all, I do want to caution you that there is some content warnings. This book contains some extreme instances of fat phobia and fat shaming that I'll be going over, so I just wanted to warn you guys. If that bothers you, then yeah, we're going to be talking about it. And yes, there will be spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for this book, then don't watch this review. So first, I wanted to get into why this book caught my eye. And as you can see from the cover, I was really drawn to it because the cover has an illustrated drawing of a plus size woman, which I'm a huge advocate for, and I think we should be having more representation on the cover, and illustrated covers are picking up the slack where stock photos are lacking. I'm always on the lookout for books that have plus size heroines who are body positive, and by the sounds of this blurb, I was really excited. So the heroine of this book is going to be a bachelorette type contestant on a show called Main Squeeze, and I will read to you the synopsis because I wanted to explain why I had certain expectations going into this book. And for those of you who think that readers shouldn't have expectations and you should just kind of go with the flow and you shouldn't expect a book to go one way or the other, that's the whole purpose of a synopsis. A synopsis is there to inform you and to tell you what type of book it is, and it should reflect the content that's inside of it. So this is the description of One to Watch. It says, real love as seen on TV. B. Schumacher is a devastatingly stylish plus-size fashion blogger who has amazing friends, a devoted family, legions of Insta followers, and a massively broken heart. Like the rest of America, Bea indulges in her weekly obsession, the hit reality show Main Squeeze. The fantasy dates, the kiss-off rejections, the surprising amount of guys named Chad. But Bea is sick and tired of a lack of body diversity on the show. Since when is being a size 0 a prerequisite for getting engaged on television? Just when Bea is sworn off dating altogether, she gets an intriguing call. Main Squeeze wants her to be its next star, surrounded by men vying for her affections. Bea agrees on one condition: under no circumstances will she actually fall in love. She is in this to supercharge her career, subvert harmful anti-fat beauty standards, inspire women across America, and get a free hot air balloon ride. That's it. But when the cameras start rolling, Bea realizes things are more complicated than she anticipated. She's in a whirlwind of sumptuous couture, internet culture wars, sexy suitors, and an opportunity or 2 or 5 to find messy, real-life love in the midst of a made-for-TV fairy tale. In this joyful, razor-sharp debut, Bea has to decide whether it might just be worth trusting these men and herself for a chance to live happily ever after. So by the sound of this synopsis, I was expecting this light and fun romance where Bea, who's not really looking for love, has this opportunity to go on the show, and she's promoting her body positive image, which she already curates through her blog and Instagram. And she ends up by having multiple suitors, multiple people. Like, she's not looking for love, but then she finds multiple people that, you know, could fit the bill, and maybe she is ready for a relationship. Because that's what it sounded like. It sounded like she was going in not expecting to fall for any guys, and she was just doing it for kind of like publicity for her own image, and then all of a sudden she has these guys falling into her lap wanting to date her, and she's gonna have a hard time choosing between them. That is not what this book is at all. And I'm going to be judging this book on a couple different criteria, and one of the criteria is that I'm judging it as a romance. It was marketed as a romance, and I don't believe that this is a romance. I would consider this women's fiction. I'm going to tell you why. Also, another disclaimer, I get really annoyed when a book is marketed as a romance and it is women's fiction. I'm in it for the romance between a couple, and if the heroine or hero has some self-growth throughout the process, then that's a bonus. But I'm here for the romance. I'm not here for the growth. That's just a bonus. So I guess this is a good time to make the distinction between women's fiction and romance. Women's fiction centers the heroine's self-growth, and it can include romantic elements, but the romance isn't actually the point of conflict that the book is centering around. And by the end, the heroine can either be happy with herself and have no love interest, or be happy with herself and then also gain a love interest in the process. But the romance is not a necessary element, but we often find it in women's fiction, which is why it's like there's this crossover that publishers feel the need to like market women's fiction and romance. And a romance centers the actual relationship. You actually have this chemistry built between two or more people, if it's like a menage or whatever. There can be internal conflict within a character that they learn to overcome by the end of the novel, but the main focus is the romance, okay? This book does not center the romance, it centers B, which is fine for a book in general, but I was expecting a romance, so I'm going to judge it like a romance. So why isn't this book a romance? The discovery of B's self-worth and own personal happiness with her body image is actually the true focus of this book. It was made to seem like she was this body confident plus size heroine, but she is extremely insecure, which I don't mind my heroines having insecurity, but whenever this book is promoted as somebody who is plus size and ready to take on the world and show everybody that, you know, plus size women are able to find love to and be the main characters on a show like Main Squeeze, which is similar to The Bachelorette, like I was for it. I was for all this positive promotion and a lot of self-love coming from the character herself. She is extremely insecure with her body and with men, so it was the opposite of what I was expecting. And though B does end up with a particular character at the end of this book, the romance is all like happening in the periphery, and there's too many characters because by the end of the book, I would say 90% of the way in, there's like 3 guys left, and I honestly couldn't tell you which one she was going to end up with. And it wasn't because she had chemistry with all of them, it was because it was a toss-up whether or not she could make it with any of these guys, period. There's too many characters that receive a lot of attention, and the guy she ends up with at the end, I just feel like I barely know him. And at the end of the book, it's like the start of their romance, which is not, I want to believe that they're actually like happy together and not just like finally figuring out that, yeah, we can start a relationship now. And it's just, I was expecting so much more. So once B is approached to join the show, she's on the show and she is unhappy the majority of the time. 90% of the time, B has like anxiety about the situation she's being put in, and she's questioning whether or not it's fake or real, and it's just honestly not enjoyable to be in her point of view because everything is just so angsty. And yeah, romance can have angst. Romance can actually be the angstiest, but 90% of the contestants that are on this show are openly cruel and hostile to B. It's not a good thing to read about. It's literally so hurtful and harmful to read about the situations that she was put in for optics. The person who recruited her to be on the show acted like she was on B's side and that she wanted to help B promote this self-love image for plus size women. And yet she puts her in situations that are awful. For example, when the guys first start meeting her, they get out of the car, one of them walks off stage as soon as they see her. And this was actually created by this producer, Lauren. She's like, oh, I told him to do that. And B is like, why would you do that? Why would you tell him? That was humiliating for me. Are you planning on humiliating me to make me a likable person to America? Like, is this your strategy for getting America to be on my side, on the side of a fat woman? It's just like, oh, it's so bad. It's so bad. And let me tell you, with the exception of like 4 guys that become like our main guys toward the end, all of these men are trash human. They're like scraping the bottom of the pond, scum, the worst of humanity. It is so, the things that they tell her to her face and the things that they tell each other, like they're whale watching whenever they're all on a yacht. It is terrible. It is so bad. And I'm just like, why is this necessary? Could we not have had a plus size woman that went on the show and like have men who are actually like excited to meet her and looking past the physical to actually get to know her. No. We have to enforce that America does not like fat people. And I'm like, yeah, we know this, but like, I want to read a romance where like a fat person's happy with themselves and finding love with like other people who don't judge them by their body image. But that's not what we get. We get a lot of judgment. There's more time spent reiterating the fact that fat women navigate this like hostile environment than there is on developing any deeper emotion beyond the physical with B and her suitors and the guy that she ends up with. Seriously, minimal amount of time dealt with the actual chemistry and relationship building. Minimal. And more about B just being like, this is a cruel, cruel world and y'all are all proving me right. And I'm just like, oh. And again, I'm looking for books that center plus size heroines who are happy with their body. And I don't mean that they don't have insecurities, but they don't take over their life and they don't obsess over the scale or their roles, and that's just not what happens to be, unfortunately. There's an incident on the yacht where the producer is like, here's some swimsuits for you to wear for the event tonight, and B starts freaking out. She doesn't want to wear a swimsuit in front of people. The producer actually says, but I thought that you wanted to promote the happy and healthy image of a plus size woman on TV, and you're telling me that you don't want to do that, and you post swimsuit images on your own blog. And B makes a good argument. She says that, you know, she controls those photos and people could screen grab from TV shows and make memes of unflattering angles. I get all that, but why couldn't we have a heroine who's just like, screw the haters, and I'm gonna go and be confident, and I'm gonna show these men that I am a catch and they should be vying for my attention? No, that's not what we get. She's very insecure and the guys don't help. Like I said, the guys are trash. And there's a problem that we run into with B going on the show to promote her own brand. So she's thinking about, what are the best answers that I'm going to give that look good for like optics? So one of the contestants asks her in casual conversation, what is your favorite food? Instead of answering truthfully, and she thinks to herself, I would normally answer burgers and Thai food. Those are the things that I like. But I know that people are going to be judging me because I'm a fat woman, and of course I eat burgers and Thai food. So instead she ends up by giving a bullshit answer about loving to browse the produce section of a farmer's market. And I'm just like, so you're not even being real with yourself. You're presenting this fake image. You want to promote body positivity, but like, you're not even being yourself. So how is that promoting anything positive if you're ashamed of just who you are? And it just really, really bothered me that this was the character that the author chose to be like a body positive icon on the show. And you missed the mark. You missed the mark. She's not. So this contributed to B's unlikable factor for me. And I don't need my heroines to be likable or perfect. I have many books that I love, a character who is difficult and makes the wrong decisions, and I still love her. But B, she just falls into this trap that I don't like. She sends the wrong message. And one of those messages is this cliche of the fat girl being in love with this Adonis of a man who doesn't really give her the time of day or only uses her when it's convenient to him. She falls into this trap not once, but twice. So at the beginning of the book, when we're introduced to B, we find out that she's been in love with her former coworker, Ray, for like 8 years. And 5 years ago, he actually kissed her whenever he was wasted. He was sloshed because he found out that his mother had a terminal illness, and he decided to kiss B one night, and then he left to go back to his hometown, never came back, and they haven't really seen each other that much since, but they've kept in touch like through text message, and they just don't talk about that night. And at the beginning, Ray comes to visit B, and she's trying to act like Ray doesn't affect her. She wants to go out with her friends, and he's like, let's stay in. And she's like, this isn't a good idea. You're engaged. Well, lo and behold, she falls into bed with Ray. And guess what happens? I'm sure you can predict it because we all know that Ray is a trash human. He definitely has to know that B is attracted to him. He kind of leads her on with like flirty banter throughout their whole entire friendship, and so he decides to sleep with her while he's engaged. So he's a trash human. But B allows herself to believe that this is finally their time and he's going to realize that they belong together. And the only thing that we get from her, why she is so in love with Ray, is because he is like this perfect specimen of a man. Like nobody is as hot as him, and nobody has the humor like him, and nobody has this connection. And I'm like, y'all haven't even been in the same state for 5 years, and he literally left you after he kissed you the first time. Then whenever he comes back 5 years later, he sleeps with you and then leaves before you wake up. When you text him, he doesn't text you back. He ghosts you. He continually ghosts you. And she's still like, oh, but like, I'm wondering when he's going to find out that we're perfect for each other. And I'm like, why? Why do we do this? Why do we do this to ourselves? How is this person the representative for a body positive heroine? She has very low self-esteem and she doesn't know her self-worth because she keeps giving it to this guy who doesn't appreciate her. She is successful. She is like Instagram famous and she still wants this guy, and she's just like, I went on other dates and there's no chemistry with them, but she's not letting herself find true love. So after he ghosts her, that's whenever she writes her blog post after drunk watching the latest season of Main Squeeze, and she does like this scathing blog post about there's no representation of like an average woman, and why aren't they featuring women who are like size 14 and up and normal looking men. And so of course that goes viral. So she's tapped to be the next person on Main Squeeze. Fine, dandy. I get why she's going in and being like, I'm not really expecting love. I'm just going to take this viral thing that happened and use it to my benefit. I get that. But when we're introduced to the men, the very first night, okay, we have our people walking in, meeting B. Some are good, some are bad, some walk off the stage like I talked about earlier. But then we have this instance where the very last guy steps out of the limo and he is gorgeous, okay? She had remarked previously that some men were attractive, but she was like, but he is like devastatingly handsome and he has a French accent. And we do find out that B, and probably the author, is obsessed with like France and French because the prologue is her studying abroad in France, and she lives in an area of Los Angeles that has like French vendors. I don't know. This author is definitely obsessed with like French. So French is like the epitome of sexy to this author. So we know that B is going to be attracted to this guy named Luke. And Luke says all the right things. He's like tattooed, he's muscular, he's a chef, and he like kisses her hand and talks French to her and says like, oh, you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, like looking her straight in the eye. And B's like, oh, I totally believe him. And I'm just like, I know what's going to happen. This is another Ray, right? This is another Ray. It's not that he doesn't find her attractive. It's that he has obvious ulterior motives, and he's going to use B to get that. B reacts to Luke in the same way that she reacts to Ray. Both of these men are like her ideal man physically, okay? And the reason why she's attracted to them is because to her, this is like this unattainable man. Like, oh, he's gorgeous, but he would never give me the time of day because I look like this. And men like that don't date women like this. And I'm just like, okay. So when these men pay a minuscule amount of attention to B, she goes gaga over it. They can do no wrong. It's just like the perfect scenario. And though she judges every other contestant more harshly, and she's always thinking about, is this real? Does he really mean what he says? Whenever she's with a guy like Ray or with Luke, she's like, oh, he makes me feel so special. And I'm just like, it makes her seem very shallow. And I don't like it, because the only men that she is like unequivocally attracted to and likes spending time with and she claims she's comfortable around are these perfect specimens of men. She sort of sabotages her other relationships in favor of these men who we know are going to be trash humans, okay? We are getting all the warning signs from Luke that, yeah, he may be nice to be, but is he ever going to really want to be in a relationship with her? No. And then she nitpicks the other guys to death. There's two other real front runners, Sam and Asher. and she nitpicks both of them to death. Sam is too young and he has no direction. He's 25 and he doesn't know exactly what he wants to do with the rest of his life. So she's just like, oh, I don't know if I can be in a relationship with him. And then Asher, she's like, well, he's too like, you know, rigid and kind of boring a little bit. He's like a history professor and I feel like he's judging me. And so she's always nitpicking these two characters, but whenever Luke's on the scene, she just like melts into a puddle of goo and it makes me kind of sick. And Asher, the guy that she does end up with at the end, is the only person that actually wants to have like a real conversation with her in terms of like relationship and like what are your goals in life and whatever. And he kind of calls her out saying like, it seems like you don't even want to get to know us. What are your intentions on the show? And she gets very offended, like, what are you talking about? She later thinks, oh, I can't trust that these guys are on the show for the right reasons. They're not really interested in me. They probably just want their 15 minutes of fame. And I'm like, that's what you're doing. So you're mad at these guys for being on the show, which Luke, that's his reason for being on a show. He wanted his 15 minutes of fame. He had no intention of actually being in a relationship at the end of the show. And he's definitely vying for his own cooking show. I mean, it's all there. But she gets mad whenever a character questions her integrity, and he's absolutely 100% right. She's on there knowing that she's faking everything and doesn't have any intention of being in a relationship at the end. So it just bothered me that she wanted to be that hypocritical. So let's talk about the love interest, Asher. They have the most real conversations. They have the most chemistry, both physically plus emotionally. They actually delve deeply into their insecurities. So Asher is a single dad, and this is one of the reasons why he was so standoffish. He didn't sign himself up for the show, his son actually did. And he wasn't sure what to expect. And when he sees the way that Bee's acting, obviously not wanting to get to know them really well, he's like, well, why should I put in effort? There's one glaringly obvious reason why I do not like the way that Bee treats Asher. On multiple occasions, she thinks about how she's not sure she should pursue a relationship with Asher because he has obvious insecurities, dealing with entering in another relationship after he felt betrayed by his ex-wife who cheated on him and left him, and he's now a single father. And I find this ironic because Bee is the most insecure character with so many insecurities herself, and yet she doesn't think that a man who has insecurities is worth it. And I get being wary about it, but it's like she hears these insecurities and they go in one ear and out the other because Asher tells her about what his ex-wife did and how he feels uncomfortable with the way that Bee has to be with these other men. And there was a scene where Luke, the French guy, insinuates that he spent the night with Bee, and Bee tells Asher that wasn't the case and she's sorry that he made her think that. They just talked, and he says, you know, I'm kind of falling for you, and that would be a problem for me if you would be physical with someone else. So she hears all this, and then we get to a scene where she has 3 guys left, and they have a night where they all go out on a date. They each have individual dates, and at the end of that night, the guy gets to spend the night with her. They don't have to have sex if they don't want to, but they have to spend the night in the suite. Well, after she goes on her date with Sam, who is, by the way, the token black character in this whole book, but you could totally forget that he's black. Like, he's just, that's his race, and there's really nothing else about him that stands out. So her problem with Sam is that he's young, and she feels like he's not mature enough to commit. So as a show of his maturity and how he's serious about pursuing a relationship with Bee because he loves hanging out with Bee, he decides to let her know that, hey, I want to let you know that I want you more than just for the physical aspect of a relationship, so I'm not going to spend the night with you. He's thinking he's being mature. Bee sees this and she thinks about it and she's like, oh, I see what he's doing. But then she thinks about the optics and she's like, but everyone's not going to see it this way. Everyone's going to see that he doesn't want to sleep with the fat girl. So all of her insecurities come pouring in and she feels badly about herself. Fine. Asher, they go on their date. And that night, Asher tells Bee, and this is after she has met like these people's families. So she's met Asher's kids and she's put them at ease and saying that she really likes their dad and whatever. So Asher explains, hey, my kids watch the show. And we know this, that his son definitely watches the show. And he's like, I don't feel comfortable in spending the night and showing them that I'm doing this on TV. Like, what kind of message is that sending them? And I just feel more comfortable. I don't want to spend the night. But I am interested in you. Obviously, I want to pursue this relationship beyond the cameras. Like, I don't want cameras following us, documenting intimate moments, which to me is completely understandable. Disclaimer, I do not watch reality TV. I don't like The Bachelor and Bachelorette because I get secondhand embarrassment from all these contrived situations. And I'm a little squicked out that bachelors and bachelorettes sleep with multiple people and then get engaged like a couple days later. And to me, that just does not vibe. But I know a lot of people who like it, including my entire family. This is an understandable decision from Asher. He explains it. And all we get from B is that, oh, this is another man refusing to be with me, and so America's gonna think that, you know, they're honestly, maybe they aren't interested in me, maybe they don't want to sleep with me, and this is just their excuse so that they don't have to sleep and make a sacrifice and sleep with the fat girl. And I'm just like, are we on this again? Are we on this again? I thought we were making a connection with these guys, but no, they don't want to sleep with you, so they hate you and they hate your body. Even though they explain the reasons why they're doing this. So of course, by the time she goes on a date with Luke and Luke comes to the suite, Luke is gung-ho. He's like, yeah, let's get to it. So B, knowing that Asher has a problem with Luke, and B, knowing that she's probably not going to end up with Luke anyway, she's like, well, I just want one night with him. So she sleeps with Luke, okay? That's amazing, and it's beautiful, and he's made her feel all these things, made her feel beautiful and cherished, and it's all good. And I'm like, great, but we know you're not going to end up with him because he doesn't want to be in a relationship, does he? No. And guess what we find out later, okay? We find out that Luke is actually banging Lauren, who is the producer who recruited B. She actually walks in on him banging her. And Lauren makes like this excuse like, oh, I couldn't help it. He's just so hot. And I'm just like, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And I hate it. I hate it, okay? At the final rose ceremony, it's not rose ceremony. It's like kiss ceremony, whatever. Final rose ceremony. Asher finds out that she slept with Luke. And also they bring in Ray because Ray has been contacting the producer. And in case you forgot, Ray is that guy that she slept with at the beginning who was engaged. And of course, the second that B is on TV, he like can't let her go. And he realizes that they belong together. And I'm just like, dude, this is, oh God, just get away, trash human. But the producers are like, ooh, this could be juicy. Bring Ray on the show. Then Asher also finds out, oh wait, you slept with an engaged man too? How can I trust you? You know, my wife is married and she cheated on me. Like, this is like history repeating itself. Obviously, you can't commit to one person. You seem conflicted and want to be with a lot of guys. I can't put my kids through this. I'm out. And so Asher leaves, which is understandable. Not only do they bring Ray on the show, and she's not initially receptive, but eventually they have a one-on-one conversation, which leads to her kissing him, which makes me think less of B, again, because he's all like, oh, I broke up with her, and, you know, I've always wanted to be with you. And I'm just like, words, 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 actions, actions, B, look at his actions. She actually goes off on her best friend, Marin, who, like, warns her, like, do not give him the time of day. Are you joking? Are you kidding? And she just like, but, like, it has to mean something that he's finally realizing it. And I'm just like, we're 95% into this book and this is your thought process. Like, you're actually thinking about entertaining this douchebag. And I'm just like, I don't like this character at all. I don't like her. Thankfully, she wises up and she realizes that Ray is not the one for her. And she ends up by not picking anybody. She doesn't give the final kiss or whatever. She doesn't get engaged at the end. And then we get like this whole spiel where she goes on these talk shows and she's promoting like, I chose myself. And myself, I'm the most important thing in my own life. And I'm like, I wish throughout the whole book I could actually believe that you consider yourself worthy and that you weren't going to be taken in by these guys who are obviously like master manipulators and bullshitters and therefore ulterior motives or are embarrassed to be seen with you, like Ray. But I don't believe it. So like, she's making all these good speeches that promote body positivity and making yourself happy, and I just don't believe her. I'm like, obviously she needs more work on herself for me to believe all this. So what was the point of being on this show? What was the point of being on the show? Oh, she found Asher. Well, thank God his kids watched the reunion ceremony and just so happened to mention to Asher, oh, she looked very sad whenever she found out that you weren't going to be going to the reunion ceremony, and Dad, you should go and be with her. Obviously, she loves you. And then finally we get Asher going like a couple weeks later and meeting B at like where they had their first date. And she's like mad at him for walking out. She's basically like, you gave up on our relationship. And I'm like, where's the accountability for yourself? Where's the accountability? So they end up happily ever aftering, moving to New York, being, a happy family. And I'm just like, I don't believe this in this. I did not like this book. The frustration that you see during this review is only a portion of the frustration that I felt while reading this. This is not the first book or romance that I've read where we have a heroine like this who has terrible self-image, and by the end, finally she finds a guy who makes her believe that she's worthy. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of having these. I want more characters like Tally Hibbert's characters, Chloe and Danny Brown. They're plus-size women, but we never really hear about them looking at their body and thinking any less of themselves. Actually, and take a hint, Danny Brown, Chloe like walks around in these booty shorts and she like has dimpled thighs, she has cellulite, and she doesn't think one thing about it, and the hero doesn't think one thing about it. He just like, oh my god, yes, all of this is mine. I want more of that and more confidence in heroines walking around in something like that, like minuscule amounts of fabric, and being a-okay with their imperfections being put on display. Rebecca Weatherspoon is another person who writes body positive heroines who are just like, this is my body and you're just gonna have to accept this, and if you think that this isn't unacceptable, then we're obviously not meant to be together. I want more of that. I want more of that. I honestly would have DNF'd this book pretty early on, if not after she slept with Ray, knowing that he was engaged, which is like in the first 10%. Then after she met Luke, because I saw what was coming. And I didn't because I used an audiobook credit for this. The library copy was taking too long. There was too many people waiting for this copy, and I had a credit, I used it, so I was like, it's gonna be wasteful. So I listened to the rest of the thing. So overall rating for this book, I would say 2 stars. Unlikable characters all around. There was barely any romance, and I felt like the synopsis was very misleading. So I don't like it whenever books do that. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you also had a problem or issues with this book, that this was as cathartic for you as it was for me. I really needed to get that off my chest. If you haven't already subscribed to my channel, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to be notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with a little HEA. Bye guys.